Noah's Ark has been rediscovered in the southern gorge of Greater Mount Ararat. It's located between 3,900 to 4,700 meters above sea level, under 4 to 11 meters beneath the surface of the gorge, under strata of lithic or material and ice. The site is certainly a maritime barge. It dates from the late Epipaleolithic period, 13,100 to 9,600 BC. It's filled with bone and wood implements, absolutely no pottery, but it has wood bowls that were covered with clay and many stone bowls. The architecture is made of seafaring wood, namely Cupressus sempervirens, Mediterranean cypress. On the interior, they're not aged. They're fashioned with mortise and tenon joinery. But on the exterior of the vessel, these are aged cypress planks that are covered in both cypress sap and also bitumen or petroleum-based sealant. And this sealant is both on the exterior and the interior. The site matches all the descriptions in Genesis, also by the Islamic prophet Muhammad in the Quran, by Berosus, by Josephus, and then there's an account that's associated with Alexander the Great. The site is a barge, there's no doubt about it. It's huge. Ballast features run the length of both the right and the left side of the vessel, or west-east starboard port. There's 3 decks, except in sub-area B3 where there's 2 decks. One of the decks has been cut through, so it fulfills not only the characteristics described in Genesis, but also in the Quran. The site has huge ramps leading to thousands of cages filled with non-skeletal animal remains between 20 centimeters in length to up to 4 meters thus far. Every sort of animal byproduct is there, from the fecal remains to feathers, hair, fur, exoskeletons, and discarded skin. So we have a complete array of mammals, avian remains, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. Not only is the animal remains spectacular, but also the archaeobotanical assemblage, just simply wonderful. You have every pre-domesticate or proto-domesticate, the cereal grains, but also you have the late Epipaleolithic diet of chickpea, pisum, pea, and Vicia urvilea, bitter vetch, that are in huge cargo holds that are lined with clay and wattle stems as a method to reduce the moisture within these cargo holds. There's very few rooms for humans, and what's remarkable about those is that all the furniture in them is attached to the walls. Again, a characteristic of a maritime barge, because you don't want the furniture flipping around and injuring or inhibiting the safety of the individuals aboard the barge. The exterior walls are angled inward. They angle inward toward the central keel, so none of the walls are vertical. Truly a remarkable sight. But now the question remains, why and how was this site that is 158 meters in length, how was it concealed for so long? And the principal reason is Armenian nationalism. And the reason it was so important to the Armenians was that they consider Hayk, their ancestor of the Armenian people, was the great-grandson of Noah. And the Armenians believed that they were the chosen people to keep Noah's Ark a secret, to prevent it from being destroyed or detrimentally affected by foreigners. And for over 2,000 years, they have succeeded. So now the methods, one of the benefits is I was able not only to visit the site, not only to study the artifacts from the site, but also to meet the descendants of the Armenian guides. And they provide insight into both why and how Noah's Ark was concealed up until recently. And one of the chief figures in both the protection and the concealment of Noah's Ark was Mkrtich Khrimian, or as they called it, Khrimian Hayk, meaning Papa Khrimian. Mkrtich in Armenian means Baptist. Mkrtich Khrimian was born in 1820 and died in 1907. And we're going to discuss much about Khrimian. Now, one of the interesting aspects is Khrimian had a very storied career in the Armenian Apostolic Church, and then became the Catholicos, or the head or the chief bishop of the Armenian Apostolic Church, or the national church. Now, the Armenians, it's a little bit different. There is a national church, which many people in the United States or in other countries would be unaware of. Very few countries have a national church, or national synagogue, a national mosque or religious authority. There is a lot of independent or mutually exclusive religious entities in most countries. But in Armenia, it's been the Catholicos, the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church. And how did the Catholicos become the protector of Noah's Ark? It starts after Jesus Christ was resurrected and ascended to heaven. Two disciples, Nathaniel and Jude, went to spread the gospel in Armenia. And they were so successful that King Tiridates III accepted Christianity, and Armenia became a Christian country. King Tiridates made Gregory the Illuminator the first Catholicos, or head of the Armenian Apostolic Church. And later, another Catholicos, Sahak I, commissioned Mesrop Mashtots to translate the first Armenian Bible. Catholicos became the protector of Noah's Ark, which was the most sacred symbol and the symbol of the Armenian nation. From the archaeological perspective, you first see artifacts from the early medieval period at the small worship areas that are near the entrances to the Noah's Ark, which are filled with ceramic vessels ranging from the pottery Neolithic to 1907. The Noah's Ark is from the late Epipaleolithic period, from 13,100 to 9,600 BC. So there is no pottery within the main structure. It's all these little reliquaries or worship areas near the entrances that are filled with the ceramic remains. The Catholicos' control of Noah's Ark was because the Catholicos and the Armenian Apostolic Church became so primary in Armenia. And since Noah's Ark was a religious structure, there was a nice tie there for the Armenian Apostolic Church in the office of the Catholicos to protect the site. And that's why you have artifacts from the early medieval period to the late medieval period, and then Armenian artifacts until 1907 in these small reliquaries, or these small worship areas. According to the descendants of the Archites, it was very seldom for a non-Armenian or a foreigner to be allowed near the Ark. However, this changed with the election of Mkrtich Khrimian. Mkrtich means Baptist in Armenian. Khrimian is the name, but many people refer to him nowadays as Khrimian Hayk. Hayk means Papa Khrimian. Similar to what many Catholics call the Pope today, Papa. Khrimian had a very storied career. First of all, he lived from 1820 to 1907. He took various positions within the Armenian Apostolic Church. And in 1854, he was visited with a very terrible tragedy where his wife and his daughter died of disease. And after that, he became a Vardapet, meaning a celibate priest. So from then on, he was exclusively dedicated to the Armenian Apostolic Church and eventually the office of the Catholicos. Now, Khrimian was elected to the position of the Catholicos, the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church. Some say in 1892, others say in 1893, but he continued to be the Catholicos until 1907. And during this time, at the very beginning of his position, the Armenian Apostolic Church was in serious financial trouble. Also, the Armenian people were confronting the Turks, who insisted that Western Armenia was part of Turkic lands. And so the Turkish people occupied that. Now, what Khrimian did is that he allowed prominent foreigners, specifically from the United States and from Russia, that were philanthropists, really helped the Armenian people, or were diplomats that helped or aided the effort for Armenian independence from Ottoman Turkey. In 1847, Khrimian was able to first, through payments from his uncle, to visit Noah's Ark and see the site on the interior. And previously, before becoming Catholicos, he also held a significant position in Jerusalem. And moreover, he was an early form of an archaeologist. They called him Antiquarians. So he was very interested in the artifacts and in the context, the archaeological context of Noah's Ark. So by taking foreigners that were thoroughly vetted by the office of the Catholicos and were very instrumental in the efforts for promoting Armenian independence from Ottoman Turkey, and also philanthropy, individuals that were very involved in orphanages with the Armenian children and the education of Armenians. These were the individuals that were allowed to go into Noah's Ark for a sum of $5,000 or 6,000 Czarist rubles. And how much is that in today's currency? $150,000 to $175,000. And that's going to be a very significant range when we talk about the rediscovery of Noah's Ark. These individuals, the money from this created a new funding source for the Catholicos, because the Catholicos was the gatekeeper for foreigners and for Armenian elites to visit Noah's Ark, visit the reliquaries or the worship areas where individuals could see inside Noah's Ark. And why this was so important was it generated a new stream of revenue for the Catholicos. And these were the areas that Khrimian Hayk contributed these newfound revenue from Noah's Ark visits. First, historic preservation. He took the monies and did a lot of restoration work at Yerevan, Khmelnytskyi, these major Armenian churches, to restore them that had become quite dilapidated. The second thing that he did is promote philanthropy, especially in the poor populations of Armenia, especially in Western Armenia, which the Turks or the Ottoman Turks referred to as Eastern Ottoman Turkey. The third item that Khrimian Hayk used the Noah's Ark visits for, the money from them, was the general debts of the Catholicos and the Armenian Apostolic Church. He paid off the debts, or he significantly reduced the debt with this new influx of monies. But the fourth thing that he used the monies for was more troubling. He used the monies from these Noah's Ark visits to foment and facilitate Armenian independence from Ottoman Turkey. Not only was this a political effort used in the Treaty of Berlin to separate Eastern Turkey, or what the Armenians believe is Western Armenia, wrest that from the Ottoman Turks, but they also used it in a military capacity, specifically with their militias. There were three principal Armenian militias. First was the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, also called by the abbreviation Dashnak. The second militia was called the Black Cross, or the Sevkach. And the third militia was the Defenders of the Fatherland, or Pashpan Henrayats. And all three militias, the militia members themselves, were called Fidei, marking you as a militia member. And what these militias did was foment, facilitate, and attack first Turkish armies doing hit and run guerrilla tactics, and also Turkish officials that they believed would hamper the efforts for Armenian independence. The second that they did was target Armenians themselves that were friendly, or that what they deemed was too friendly and too supportive of the Ottoman Turkish regime. So these individuals were executed. Khrimian Hayk was very influential in not only giving monies from Noah's Ark visits to these militias, but also instructing them into the day-to-day running and the methodologies that the Fidei were using. And one of the principal methods they used was terror tactics, or terror tactics, to execute members of Turkish authorities and also Armenians that they felt were inhibiting Armenian independence. For instance, one of the things that Pashpan Henrayats had, or the Defenders of the Fatherland, is that they would, after executing a member of the Turkish community or the Armenian community that was resistant to Armenian independence, they would leave a card, and on the card they would leave their names. And Khrimian told them, don't put your names on the card, because this will identify amongst the Turkish community and the Turkish military to instruct them who is behind the militia. The Defenders of the Fatherland militia did not listen, and the Turks found these cards, researched every single name, and then found the individuals and promptly executed them. Again, the involvement in Khrimian not only to provide monies for the militia, but also to instruct them in the methods that they were used to bring independence to Armenia. Ultimately, though, Armenian independence failed. The Turks became very aggressive, and starting with the Hamidian massacre, they killed hundreds of thousands of individuals that were part of the Armenian militia and the Armenian peoples. And this resulted in 1915 with the Armenian genocide. But in 1907, Khrimian realized that Armenian independence was not going to be achieved in Western Armenia. And that leads us to our next discussion. What were the final orders of Khrimian Hayk in 1907, just before he died? And what this has done, this secrecy and this effort to keep Noah's Ark concealed, has prevented individuals from detrimentally affecting the Ark. However, this has also led in 1907 to the former guides to Noah's Ark to remove hundreds of artifacts from the site, both from the interior of the site, from the late Epipaleolithic period, but also from the small worship areas at the entrances to Noah's Ark, which were from the Pottery Neolithic to 1907. And all these artifacts were transported mostly to what is now the Republic of Georgia. And now this secrecy around the site, this lack of supervision, government supervision, has also resulted in more artifacts recently being taken out of the site, which is just a nightmare for archaeology and historic preservation. And even worse, because of the warming temperatures, 50% of the glacial ice and permafrost has melted on the summit of Greater Mount Ararat, and rapid decomposition and fungal growth and rot has set into Noah's Ark. So the good news is that the Ark is now protected by the Turkish government. The bad news is there is a dire emergency need for conservationists and archaeologists to preserve the wood architecture of the Ark, and also to preserve the archaeobotanical remains and the byproducts of animals within the cages. So it's a real emergency. And why? Why is it an emergency? Because Noah's Ark represents unity, global unity, that we all emerge from Noah's Ark. It represents the apogee, the height of the late Stone Age, the end of the Stone Age, and the original site, or the progenitor site, for the Neolithic, the farming age, as well as being an important shrine to three world religions, namely Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Thank you.